Peace everyone, Unmask Art here. Welcome back to another art critique. I hope everyone is having a lovely day. I'm having a lovely day because I got to already look at everybody's fantastic work. I'm really impressed with all of the work that was submitted for this month's live critique. Hey there, Susan, John, Diane, good to see you. Okie dokie. So, getting right into it, up first is Jackie. And technically, Jackie didn't submit her work for the live critique. She wrote me a lovely email and was just expressing her gratitude for what I do and all of that. And she wanted to share some of her work with me, and I was really pleased with what I saw. And so I picked one of my favorite pieces that she sent me, this colored pencil piece here, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because a lot of things are going really right, Jackie, with your work here. There's just a couple small things that I think if you keep in mind for your future projects, you'll just see it look that much better. So, real quick, lovely background. I think that you did a really good job at separating the background from the main subject. You have good skin tones. You have nice shadows. Even on the skin, you have some dark colors. You have some of the wrinkles that show up really nicely, especially around the lips. I think the lip wrinkles look really good. The subtle texture on the chin. Everything about the face looks really good. The only thing that I would say you want to be careful with in the future is haloing. And what I mean by that is just a bit of the color around, like, I think this might be a broom or something, but you can see a little bit of this haloing right around the broom. And what I mean by that is you drew lines that are filling in the background around the objects, and you can see that a little bit here. You can see it right around here. You can see where it sort of separates the main subject from the background. It's kind of this line where you wanted to get that sharp edge to separate the subject from the background, but you have to be exceptionally careful when you do it because you don't want to create these weird sort of outlines that sort of break that illusion of separating the subject from the background. It sort of creates this strange outline that just doesn't occur when you're replicating a photograph. So just be very careful with that. Really nice bokeh effect on the background, by the way. I think that's really good. Good values in the background. I like the color variation and everything like that. Um, so just those outlines, you just want to be a little bit more careful with the outlines there. And then the only other thing I would say is don't be afraid to add a little bit more color to the skin. You got some nice reds and some oranges and everything like that. You have good values, but I feel like you could go, I don't know, maybe even maybe in a bit more yellow in the skin. You have a lot of yellow in the background, so don't be afraid to reuse that yellow in the skin or even in the highlights on the clothing here. So don't be afraid to use the colors that you put in the background to tone the colors in the main subject. That's going to help everything feel a little bit more harmonious. Um, my voice is only in your left ear. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Let me see if I can fix that. Check one, two, check. There we go. Um, Sorry about that. Yeah, it seems my audio was only in one side, so yeah, forgive me for that. Yeah, it should be working now. Let me know, John. Thank you for that. I actually changed my um I changed my streaming software, and so I had to reset everything up this week. I think that this software here that I'm using is a little bit better. Um, so If you notice any strangeness, feel free to let me know. Hey there, Darek, Patricia, Sherry, Tina, good to see you, by the way. All right, moving on. Fantastic work, Jackie. Thank you so much for sharing your artwork. Up next is Zayar, and he did this still life in colored pencil. And there's not a whole lot for me to say about this one. Good colors. The photograph. Now I altered the photograph a little bit because it seemed like the white balance was off. So hopefully my correction gets a little bit closer to what the original artwork was supposed to look like, because when I got the artwork, it looked more like more like this. So there was a lot of blue in it. So I took out the blue, and hopefully that looks a little bit closer to what the artwork actually looks like. The two things I want to discuss with this project here, Sayar, is the first and most important thing is adding more layers to your artwork. You can see if I just zoom in a tiny bit here, which I don't really think I need to zoom in at all for you to see it, but you can see a lot of the pencil grain in the artwork and in the shadow and everything like that. And that pencil grain is allowing the white of the paper to show through more and more. And that changes the overall color. So when you look at this project from a normal viewing perspective, you notice that this bright orange, this really bright red and bright green, they're not as vibrant as they ought to be because they're showing so much of the white paper coming through. So if you were to fill in that paper even more, then your peppers are going to look that much better. And also, you're going to start to see a lot more of the form of the peppers because you're going to have some of this darker green and then some of the lighter green, and you're going to be able to tell the difference between those colors a lot better than you can if you're leaving a lot of the paper show through. So just take your time in filling in each individual pepper. Just work one small section at a time because it feels a lot less taxing when you just do sort of a small area at a time. And then same thing with the cast shadow. Don't be afraid to fill this cast shadow in and cover the paper completely. You're just going to have a much better result if you do that. And that's pretty much it. Thank you, Zayar, for the submission, and I look forward to seeing some more work in the future. All right, up next is Dorothy, and she has this lovely pastel portrait of her bird. I presume that it is her bird and her hand. And this is a really good project. There's a lot that I can say about this. It's very, very well done. Drawing accuracy is fantastic. The composition is really cool. I like that you cut out the background. It's just sort of your hand floating there with the bird. I think it looks really, really nice, especially on this tan paper. Really good color choice, I think, for the paper. So yeah, it looks really good. Now, what I want to discuss here is shapes, okay? So if you break down your objects into shapes, you're going to see an immediate improvement with almost zero effort, okay? So you don't have to try extra hard, and you're going to see an immediate improvement in your artwork if you focus on shapes. And what I mean is the shapes that distinguish light from shadows. So if we look at the reference photo, we can see, actually, before I point it out, what direction is the light coming from? So everyone in chat can chime in on the answer. Pop quiz question: what is the direction the light source is coming from? And I'm going to get some water while I wait for the answers to come in. This is a pastel project here. Okay, very good. The light source is coming from the left. Okay, it's coming from the left. It's not just coming from the left, it's actually coming from the top left. It's coming more at a downward angle like this. And there's there's a number of clues. Yes, top left, very good. There's a number of clues. So if you didn't get the answer correct here, the best clues are cast shadows in the directions that they fall. So a good example is the light is coming down here. It's hitting the bird, so the bird is blocking the light and it's casting a shadow across the fingers. See that line right there? See that line right across the finger? The other is that there's this cast shadow, right? So this tells us the bird, the light has to be on this side. That is the worst arrow I've ever drawn. The light has to be on this side because it's casting a shadow right here across the hand. Okay. The other thing is that you can see the thumb is casting a shadow across this finger. And this finger is casting a shadow here, and the entire finger is casting a shadow across the palm of the hand, all shadow here. This finger casting a shadow across the finger beneath it, and so forth, right? So there's the identifying features that tell you where the light source is. So if you have trouble finding out or thinking about where the light source is coming from, just pay attention to the cast shadows, okay? That's going to be the best way to decipher the light. Okay, so now that we know the direction the light is coming from, we have to break down the shapes that create the form of the image that separate the light from the shadows. Okay, so we have the bird. You can think of the bird's head as being cylindrical, right? So the cast shadow cuts across like this, right? Because the light source is over here. Well, the body is like another oval shape, and the cast shadow again is like this. So all of this is shadow, right? This falls along the shadow. And we think of the fingers as being like cylinders. So let's, I'll just try to draw a cylinder shape here, okay? So cylinder for the finger, and then there's another cylinder here because it changes direction, right? So these cylinders have a form shadow that cuts across them like this, right? Because the light source is coming from here. So all of this is the form shadow, right? And then the thumb also is a cylinder like this. Sorry for my poor cylinder. So here again, shadow, right? This is how you want to think about these objects. You want to think about them in 3 dimensions with the light source in mind. So with those things in mind, being able to identify the shapes and where the forms are, you can separate the light from the shadows. So you get shapes like this. So I'm going to separate the actual shadow of the bird. So here's the entire shadow. All of this space here is the shadow on the bird. So the other part of the bird is light, that part is shadow. Where is it here? Right? So in the reference photo, you can separate the light. Oops, sorry, I hit my microphone. You can separate the light from the shadow. But in your pastel painting here, you can't. So you will immediately improve this if you, let's just take, let's just go here. I'm going to sort of freehand copy this general shape of the shadow. So I'm just going to sort of freehand it really quick. And I'm just going to select the shadow part of the bird, or at least the part of the bird that's supposed to be shadow, right? Because we just identified the shape of the shadow. And let's just fill this in with a dark bluish color. maybe something like this. And then I'm just going to turn it to a soft light, maybe vivid light. Let's see what looks the best. Overlay. Let's do overlay, and let's just change the color a little bit to make this look a bit more natural. So maybe pull out some of the blue, add some green, maybe desaturate it just a tiny bit. Something like that. And now I'm just going to take my brush. Let's do this. I'm going to just take my brush. I'm going to soften the edge. Just going to soften this edge a little bit so that the shadow looks more natural. And immediately the bird becomes three-dimensional, right? This is without any indication of light. And then as soon as I add the shape that I've identified in the reference photo that expresses where the shadow is, and I apply it to the bird immediately becomes more three-dimensional. That same exact thing you also need to do on the fingers, because the fingers also don't have any of that light source coming over to them. It does a little bit, but not as much as you should. You should be able to identify the shapes. So again, if I take my lasso tool here and I just copy the shadow shapes, so something like this, it comes down, goes up, down, comes up, cuts across the finger, comes down, cuts across the finger here, comes over like this. So there's that shadow shape. This one cuts across here, comes down, up, right in here, in between the little toes of the bird. There's this shadow shape, and I can see that you indicated a little bit of the shadow shapes, but you just didn't emphasize them enough. You didn't distinguish them enough, okay? So let's do the finger down here. So it's the whole finger except for that part right there. So that whole part of the finger is in shadow. This part is in shadow all the way across, coming up the thumb, here, this, and much all of that. And the thumb itself, sort of like this, up, all of this, here, here, something like that, okay? It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. Okay, so again, I'll turn this to overlay. I'll just alter the color a little bit, maybe make it a little bit more reddish or orange. Here we go. Desaturate it a bit, lighten it, maybe about there. Yeah, I'd say about there. And there you go. It's not perfect because it's, I'm just freehanding it really quickly on the fly. But if I soften some of these form shadows so they're not so harsh, you get a little bit of a gradient there. And then all of a sudden the hand becomes more three-dimensional. So that's what it's all about. So let me get rid of that. So here is the before, right? It looks really good. Drawing accuracy is good. Composition is good. Colors are good. The only thing that you're missing that you want to make sure you bring into your artwork is the shadow shapes. So just bring in the shadow shapes. Here's what it looks like on the bird. Here's what it looks like on the hand. Everything looks immediately more three-dimensional. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to be able to do that. To identify the light source, you don't even really need to identify the light source. You just need to be able to distinguish light from shadow. And if you can take the shapes from the shadow and apply it to your artwork, you're going to immediately have better results. So anyways, fantastic pastel painting, Dorothy. Thank you so much for the submission. Up next is Jennifer. And this one's wild. So her artwork's on the right, since I have to almost always distinguish her artwork from the photograph because she does such precise detail. This one's difficulty talk about really because uh, well, you don't really ever go wrong in your artwork, so there's not a whole lot to actually critique. There's only a list of compliments, and I run out of them rather quickly. Uh, but this one is unique for sure. You mentioned something about like the lightness and the darkness, difficulties with the photograph, and I can see that. I can see that maybe your photograph doesn't represent your artwork as well as you'd like. It's understandable. If I could get a photograph that represents my artwork as well as it looks in real life, then maybe I'd have more Instagram followers. But I think the only thing that I would say maybe could be adjusted in this is the center part. So again, talking about shadow shapes, um, if you look here, this is the general shadow shape that you get in the center part. It's sort of just darker right here, whereas yours doesn't really have that. So if I just go over here and let's just fill it in with the same bluish color, and then I will turn it to overlay. I'd make a couple adjustments here, be something like that. There, it's fixed, right? Like it's just that small part. It's a little bit darker right there on the bottom curve, and perhaps it's a subtle cast shadow because it looks like the light source is like pointing straight down almost with the camera itself, but it's just slightly down to the bottom. And so it's creating a little bit of a cast shadow from all of these leaves, petals. I don't know what this is. I sort of look like I'm looking at a Brussels sprout under the microscope or something. But like a subtle cast shadow down here on the bottom. And I would say that's the only thing that I feel like is missing. And it also creates a little bit more depth to the center part, which yours doesn't have as much as the reference. There's just a little bit more depth down there. And I think it's just because that shadow is a bit deeper right here down towards the bottom. And so that's really the only thing I could possibly complain about or critique regarding this. You always submit such unique. What's the word? Not floral, but the plants. What's the plant artwork? Um, botanical artwork. So this one's really cool. This one's different. I've never seen anything like it before, so it's really cool and super crisp, sharp lines. Love it. Yeah, the super crispiness of all the lines is just fantastic. Yes, botanical. Thank you, uh, Tina. Um, yeah, very, very cool. All right. Up next is Joy. And Joy, if you are in chat, let me. I was trying to think of, I was just looking at the reference and I was like, what animal is this? And the only thing I could come up with was a bunny. Like, I think this is a bunny rabbit. I hope I'm correct. Um, Again, the original photograph was really warm. It looked more like if I change it and if I get these wrong, if I get these, it looked a little bit more like this when I got it. The just the artwork, okay, just the artwork. It was really, really warm. Um, and so I color corrected it, and it started to look more like the reference photo. So I'm hoping that my color correction makes it appear more like what the original artwork looked like. I always try to give my best guess with some of the artwork that you guys submit, and if I feel like the white balance is off a little bit, I try to correct it. So hopefully I didn't overstep here too much, but really, really well done. Like the fur texture is really fantastic. The eye looks great. Very deep, dark shadows. Now again, some of the deepness of it might have been lost with the photograph. Um, I didn't change any of that. I didn't change like contrast or anything like that. I just adjusted the white balance a bit. Um, but I'm guessing that the dark areas are darker in person, so I won't comment on making them darker if you have them as dark as possible. Really great textures in the eye. It looks really, really good. It definitely pulls you in. Um, the only thing that I would, oh, the other thing, excellent shapes. Okay, so getting back to shapes. Now, this isn't exactly due to a light source or anything like that, but just the overall shapes of fur color. So this white shape here, this black shape right here, this one that comes up above the eye, all of this, this deep black shape right here, all of these shapes, the brown, they are in the reference photo. So you have all of these shapes identified really, really well. And I wanted to commend you on that because that's something that a lot of people overlook. If you just do the base shapes and then add the fur texture on top, you're going to find that fur is actually remarkably easy to do. So I just wanted to commend you on those shapes really quick. The only thing that I would say you could probably have done better is this edge right here. So I'm going to just circle everything. So this edge where the brown comes into the black and the white comes into the black. If you notice, the reference photo has, and you have that transitionary blue, there's a lot of blue that happens in the transitions. Now, here I feel like you could have gone a lot bluer in the transition between the black and the white. You can see a lot of the white fur here is actually just blue. But this transition in particular isn't in focus, and so it's just softer. There's not as much clear fur texture, and in yours you can see a lot of these little lines here, and I don't think that helps. I think what would have been better is if you just blurred this, if it was all blurry. And let's see if I can artificially do that really quick. So just give me a second. So I will show you what I mean. So let's go with like that level of blur. And let's just blur this. So by removing that texture, you notice how much more your eyes are just drawn into the actual eye of what I hope is actually a bunny, because I think it's a bunny. Looks like a bunny eye to me. But by removing the excess texture right here, especially in the front of the eye, it just pulls you more and more into this part of the eye. And you could have done the same up here too. So all of that, just get rid of that harsh edge, and you just sort of get pulled into the eye. And so that's the only real correction that I would probably have recommended, and maybe a little bit more blue in some of the transitions. But fantastic work, Joy. Thank you so much for the submission. All right, up next is Cindy, and she has this ink and colored pencil. I can't remember. She mentioned the artist here that did the original. I can't recall. And I'm not sure if the blue, like this weird blue stuff, is artifacts or if that's part of the original. It doesn't seem like it would be part of the original. Some kind of weird artifacts or something. I don't know if that happened when I imported the image or when it was uploaded to Facebook. I don't know, but I'm not familiar with this particular piece, the original. But this one's really cool. I can see the ink outlines that you talked about. You did like the outlining in ink and then you colored it in. Give me one sec. I need some water. I feel like I'm talking like 100 miles an hour. Been drinking water all day. I just can't seem to not be thirsty. Um, Anyways, so you did a fantastic interpretation here. I love the colors. I love the unique changes that you made to the original, like the water pouring into the bucket. Honestly, the water pouring into the bucket makes a little bit more sense, in my opinion. I think it makes sense that the water would be pouring into the bucket filled with water right next to it. I don't know. I don't know the context of this, so maybe it doesn't make sense that the bucket would have the water pouring into it. Who knows? Um, good use of colors. I like that you added this lantern here to give light source to the original, and you did a fantastic job. You did a fantastic job incorporating the color of the light that would be coming from this light source, because you get to play around with my favorite pair of complementary colors, orange and blue. So you get this really warm orange light from the candle, and you can see how that light is pouring over the bricks here and hitting the top of the little girl's head and highlighting the broomstick a little bit and highlighting the stone stairs here. And then you get the blue of the water. So you get this really nice play of color complements, and then also you get to create a little bit more of this dynamic light that the original doesn't capture. I mean, it's black and white after all. Um, you have a lot of really unique textures in here. You have the wood grain, you have the stone, the stone wall here, you have the water, you have uh, the broom part of the broom. I don't, what is the broom part? The bristles? The brooms have bristles like brushes. I don't know. This part of the broom, you have some of the wood here, you have some metal on the bucket. You have a lot of different materials uh, that you're adding texture to that the original captures a little bit, but a little bit looser. And then, of course, the texture of the water itself. So, on all of those things that you added to the original, you did really really good job. I like the rust coming off the bars, the the moldy green on the bricks, all of the unique colors and textures that you added really add a whole lot to the image. Now that I've complimented your artwork for 5 minutes now, I'm going to talk about what you sort of did wrong a little bit and where you could have improved upon your interpretation of the original. Okay, so the first thing is the perspective. Okay, the perspective of the stairs and the bucket are incorrect. And I just did a like a 2 week series teaching perspective in the art club. I don't know, like 2 months ago or something like that. Uh, perspective. I learned perspective when I was 12 from a few library books when I was in 6th grade. And I learned 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, and 3 point perspective from like 3 or 4 library books from my school. I would just, my hobby when I was in the 6th and 7th grade was to go to the library, find these obscure books that teach you something. And I learned all kinds of goofy stuff. I learned perspective. I always liked to draw, so perspective was natural. I learned some cartooning. I learned origami. I did like 3 or 4 books on origami. I learned how to fold like really unique paper airplanes, and then some other various paper uh, craft kind of things. But perspective has always stuck with me. Okay, I learned perspective when I was 12, and I never forgot anything about it. And I practiced it. And so when I see perspective problems, to me, they stick out like crazy. They probably stick out to me much more than they do other people. And so that's why I'm so prone to correcting them. So the first thing, the stairs. So if we take the stairs, now I'm going to imagine the stairs come like this, and then you have this line here, and then this line and this line should be perpendicular in space. You have this line, and then the bottom edge, right? And this edge should come out to like here, and then the front of the stair should be here. Obviously, these are stone stairs. They're probably not perfectly square, right? So there's some change in elevation there that you can sort of get away with a little bit of mistake in perspective. But I think the biggest issue with the stairs is just how large this part is in comparison to this part. Because if you were looking slightly down on the stairs, as the stairs get higher, the top section gets smaller and smaller. So for instance, if I have a staircase, so you can think of a staircase as being a ramp. So here's stair one, right? Here's the top of the stair, okay? That would be the top of the stair. And then the next stair that goes up, the top of the stair, let's say the horizon line is here, right? Once you get to this horizon line, you no longer see the top of the stair because you're not above the stair. So as you get here, the top of the stair is going to be perfectly flat, and you're not going to see the top of it. And then the next stair, you're only going to see a tiny bit. And then so when you get down to this stair, you're only going to see a tiny bit more. And so this is the top part of the stair that you put your foot on. And you notice that as it goes up, it gets smaller and smaller because your eye level is meeting it when you hit the horizon line. And then when you go above the horizon line, so the stair here, you won't see the top of it at all. And as the stairs go up, this line will come down. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to complicate it too much, but so the platform here being larger than here sort of messes with the perspective a little bit. So that's the first thing with the stairs. The next thing is the bucket. So the bucket, think of it like a cylinder. You can build a cylinder within a rectangle, okay? So again, the fact that you can see the top inside of the bucket tells you about where the horizon line would be. The horizon line is probably around here, okay? So you would see this opening, but it would be an ellipse. It would be an ellipse. Yours is a little bit wide, or tall, I guess you could say. It's a little bit tall. And then down here, this would be a little bit flatter as it's closer to, a little bit closer to the horizon line. So these ellipses would not be identical, which you can see here. You can see the wideness at the top. Sorry, it's going to be extended a little bit more like that. And then this one's a little bit flatter, just a little bit flatter. And then you can see the metal things that go around the bucket, they match the change in the ellipse. And your metal things don't quite match the contour of the bucket, so they're just off a little bit. The other thing about the bucket, the handle here wraps around the bucket, and so it's connecting to the other side, you know, like buckets. That's usually how bucket handles go. And you put your handle just like symmetrically, perfectly in the front. Symmetry, you gotta be careful when you use symmetry on objects because it sort of stands out awkwardly. Because if you were to think of this situation that the artist is displaying here, symmetry doesn't really work because it's sort of like there's this little girl who knows why she's mopping the dirt. I mean, it sort of looks like she's mopping up the dirt. I don't know what the story is supposed to be, but the idea that the bucket would have like this really nice symmetrical placement in the scene feels unnatural. You know, it's like when you're watching a movie and you can tell there's advertisement placement because the soda can or the energy drink, the label is perfectly placed to show right up in front of the camera, right? Like it's not skewed a little bit. Like if you saw a Pepsi can or a Coca-Cola can and it was turned around a little bit, most people still going to recognize it as a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi can. They're going to identify it because of the colors and a little bit of the logo showing. But that's not how they do it in movies when they have paid product placement. They make sure that that logo is square pointed right at the camera. And every time I see it, like a siren goes off because it's so unnatural. Okay? It's so unnatural. So just be careful with the symmetry use. It would have looked more natural if this bar here was slightly skewed and this one was like on the edge and then the handle was like wrapped around like the original. So I'm being a little nitpicky just because, you know, these things, as you progress and as you want to get better at your composition, these are the really small things that you have to think about. And symmetry is one of those things. The other thing is the texture of the water. So the texture of the water it's too much. Uh, you have a lot of texture, especially in comparison to the original. Too much texture is too much, you know, like the texture of the dress and the clothes competing with the texture of the water, competing with the texture of the bricks, competing with the texture of the door. Um, Remember, there's three types of contrast. Pop quiz question: what are the three types of contrast? Let's get those answers in chat really quick. The three types of contrast. Now, obviously, I've given you a big hint at one of the more unknown types of contrast. I'm gonna get some more water in the meantime. Haha, you're hilarious, John. Light, color, and texture. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's value contrast, saturation contrast, and texture contrast. But light, color, and texture is the same thing. So here, everything is textured, right? And every texture is competing for your attention. Okay? So when you want to create a dynamic image, you don't make everything real dark because you're just going to be looking into a shadow, right? You don't make everything too light because then there's no form and there's no contrast. You know, highly contrasted, the highest contrasted artwork is always perceived to be better than low contrast artwork. And since contrast can take place with values, with saturation, and with texture, you have to make sure that you're not overdoing one of those three. So if you have good contrast when it comes to value, which I think you do here, you have a lot of really dark colors, you have nice bright areas as well. So value wise, you have a lot of great contrast. Color, you also have a lot of variation in saturation. You have these grays and toned down browns in the walls, and then you have the bright red. You have a little bit of oversaturation with the blue, but you have nice saturation contrast as well. You have dark desaturated colors, you have light saturated colors. But then when we look at texture, we notice, okay, everything has a whole lot of texture here. The door is really textured. The bricks are really, really textured. Then the broom is really, really textured. Her clothes are really, really textured. Her hair is really, really textured. The water on the ground is super textured. Like the texture of the water makes me feel like she's standing on top of a river because there's so much texture going on there. And if you see the comparison, what the original artist did here is he didn't really draw any water, but you know she's standing on wet ground. And the reason you know she's standing on wet ground is because of the reflections. So the original artist used the reflections or the reflective property of the water to express that the ground is wet. And then he used just very, very subtle amount of texture, or more or less just shapes, not so much texture, in order to show a little bit of movement in the water. And that's what makes his water look so natural in comparison. So here we have the reflection of the broom, and the reflection is bending like this. Why is the reflection bending like this? Because the movement of the broom in the water is creating these circular ripples sort of in the place where she slapped the broom down on the ground, and it's rippling out the water in these circular shapes. And then you have her reflection, and her reflection's pretty standard. And then some of it, as it gets out here, it gets a little bit wider and a little bit more ripply. And it's just these subtle ripples that give the water or give the illusion that there's water on the ground. You don't have any reflections. Like you have some color hitting the water, like some of the yellow and stuff splashed into the water, but there's no actual reflections here, which makes the water look like it's running. Because when you look at a river, you don't see the reflections of the trees on the other side. The reason you don't is because the water is rushing so much that the ripples are changing shape so quickly. There's no chance for your eyes to glimpse the or identify the reflections in the water from what's on the other side. But here, there's no reason that the water would be rushing, at least not from the perspective of the original artwork. It just seems like the ground is wet. And so you don't want to remove these shapes. These are very, very important shapes that give the illusion of water. Because you have the illusion of water in your artwork, but like I said, it looks more like she's standing on a river as opposed to standing on wet ground. All right. Anyways, I think I talked about this one enough. This one gave me a lot to talk about. I like this one a lot, so don't take any of my criticisms in a negative way. Just trying to give you helpful input, you know. But fantastic work, Cindy. I really like this one a lot. All right, up next is Joanne. She's got a couple of these projects for me. She's got this lovely pet portrait, and you did fantastic on this, Joanne. Like this is really, really, really good pastel work. Um, Great background too. I love the color you chose for the background. It's so nice. It's really, really nice color for the background. Like I feel like the background has a little bit of this orangey fur color in it. It's like some spots here and up in the corner. I feel like it has that oranginess to it. And I also feel like it has like the nice grayish color as well. And it's just like a really soft, very nice background that separates the subject from it. So a really great color choice on the background. Uh, Great execution on the fur, like the especially right here. This is a tricky part. This is a tricky part of the fur. That sort of squiggly, scraggly fur that on the top of terriers in particular. Terriers always have that scraggly fur. So like Yorkies or um, schnauzers or any terrier breed, they always have that scraggly hair that comes up through between the eyes and then up in the forehead. Excellent job. Like that fur looks so good right there. Really, really good. The eyes look fantastic. The browns, I feel like you could add a touch more orange in the brown there, but still like the eyes are fantastic. I'm just being nitpicky. Um, the nose looks great. Honestly, your nose looks better than the reference photo because in the reference photo, the nose is not in focus. Actually, your artwork is better than the reference photo in just about every way, really. Because the background in the reference photo is chair or something. I don't know. It's terrible, right? It's not like it's not an appealing background. You took all of that out of, which I'm super glad with. Sometimes people want to copy the background in reference photos for some reason. It's very often not the thing you want to do. So honestly, your artwork outperforms the reference photo in almost every way. Um, Really good fur right here. I always say that like with pretty much any four-legged animal, the chest hair right here where the neck meets the shoulders, like right in between the two front legs here, where the fur just mushes together into a mess. That's one of the harder parts to do because I'm always emphasizing the importance of following the direction of the hair flow. But when you get to a section like this, what even is the direction of the hair flow, right? It's just a mess. And you navigated that mess really well. So I commend you on that as well. Now, for the one thing that I have to say, you will immediately improve your artwork, and I've already talked about it today. That is the shadow shapes. Okay, so one thing in the reference photo, if you look, especially here, what does the fur have here that the fur does not have here? So I'll take two answers, but I'm looking for one specifically, really. But I'll accept two different answers. But somebody tell me, what does the reference photo have that the drawing doesn't? Color? No, I'm pretty sure they both have color. Shading, don't use the word shading. Shading's not a real word. It's not a thing. Shading's not a thing. Not smoothness. I mean, there's a degree of smoothness, um, but that's partially because the reference photo isn't in focus. Shadow and value. No, it's not. There's values. Like, look at the nose. The nose is super dark. The fur is nice and bright. There's values. Come on, one more person. Give me an answer. Just, just say whatever. No one's got it right. No one has it right. Everybody is overlooking it. Yeah, shadowing. Don't use shadowing as a word. Shading is not a thing. You have shading is what non-artists call light. Okay, so here is the answer since nobody got it. Where is the shine? Where's the shine? I was looking for shine or highlights. Shine or highlights. Do you not see how shiny the fur is here? Am I the only one that sees shiny fur? Like, is this not shine right here? Or highlight? Is this not a shine or a highlight right here? Are these not shiny highlights? How's this fur? Let me get rid of this circle. This isn't shiny to anybody? This doesn't look shiny, right? That's not, is this not shiny? Have I lost my mind? Or is that fur shiny? It is shiny. I'm waiting for confirmation because either that fur is shiny or I've lost my touch. I'm not saying overly shiny. I'm just saying that fur has a shine to it. Most most hair does have a shine, right? Most hair has a little bit of a sheen, glimmer. The light reflects off of it. There's highlights, right? There is some degree of shiny. It is shiny. Okay. I was starting to wonder if I was imagining it. Now, what makes that fur look shiny? Why does the fur in the reference photo look shiny, but the fur in the pastel painting not look shiny? Contrast. Yeah, contrast does play a really big role in whether or not something looks shiny. I mean, if we do like a translucent or a shiny object or something along those lines, then it's the separation of the dark values and the really, really bright values that make the shiny objects look shiny. The eyes. Do the eyes look shiny? Anybody gonna argue that the eyes are shiny? Because I think these eyes are really shiny. I think they're super shiny and they look really, really good. But the fur isn't. The fur is not shiny because this color is not white. It's too much white. This is one of the really, really common missteps with fur. And that is this dog has a lot of white fur. But what do we know about white fur is that white fur isn't white. So in these areas that are shiny, like this, look look at this color. That that fur is not white. That fur is pretty dark. Pretty dark. See how dark? See the separation? How about this? I mean, both like value wise, it's pretty close, but color wise, it's not. And the reason this fur looks shiny is because the bright parts are surrounded by darker parts. Okay? They're surrounded by the darker parts. So you have to get the separation of those values and colors. If the fur looks white, just remember that it's not. Yeah, too much white. Yeah, it's just too much white. But I mean, it's a beautiful portrait. It's a beautiful portrait. But once you get to this stage, right, Joanne? So once you get this good, you want to get better, don't you? Like you want to, what's the next step? See, this is the thing. Like, we'll do something. I have this feeling. I have this feeling a lot with my chess game. Like, I study, I practice, I read, I do puzzles, and I'm just stuck. I don't know what the next. I don't. What am I supposed to do next to get better? Well, I'm telling you exactly what you got to do next to get better, because you've done all the hard stuff. You've already done all the hard stuff, Joanne. This is a fantastic pet portrait. Now you just need to get into the subtle, tiny things. And in order to get into the subtle, tiny things, you need to know what those are. And what those are is it's just back to those shapes, really. You know, if you go back, I've talked a lot about shapes. You know, if you break down these shapes, then you're going to feel a little bit more confident applying them to here. So you can see a little bit of the shape, right? You have this shape here. It's not exactly what's in the reference photo, but you sort of have this brighter shape area, and then you have this darker shape, and this darker shape's pretty good. This darker shape's here, right? So we can see that you're recognizing the separation of these shapes. The only problem is you just aren't quite getting them dynamic enough. So you need to rebalance the calibration a bit. You know, go darker. Like if I grab this color right here, like that's how much darker you need to be here, right? It's quite a bit darker. Um, but that's what's going to take your pet portraits even further. Once you identify that, because then you're going to start to create shiny fur. Shiny fur is going to be the next step for you, I think. But I mean, texture wise, you're perfect. Now you just need to make a few adjustments as far as color precision. But yeah, um, hopefully everything there that I explained was pretty clear. But fantastic work. Up next, Joanne's got a colored pencil portrait. And one of the things that I did here is I took the portrait and I overlaid it, so you can see the shift, right, between the accuracy. I don't know if you freehand drew this or if you used some tracing method or anything like that, but I overlaid it right on the irises. So I tried to get the scaling as best as I possibly could, but you can see there's quite a few discrepancies as far as drawing accuracy is concerned. So I'm just going to touch on that a little bit. Um, so you can see that the eyebrows are pulled in. The eyebrows are a little bit too small. The ears seem a little bit too small, right? Ears a little bit smaller. The mouth is a little bit smaller. Notice on yours, the mouth is just barely wider than her nose, whereas in the original, you can see that the corners of her mouth, especially this corner, extends pretty clearly across outside her nose. So if I draw a line here, give me a second. If I just draw a line here, the corner of her mouth, see how it almost touches her nostril, but if I do it over here, it's pretty clearly not. So okay, so if you did trace it, you'll have to just be a little bit more careful with your accuracy there. Perhaps you lost a little bit of the accuracy while coloring it. That is usually what happens. You just lose a little bit of accuracy there while you're actually coloring. Um, oh, hey there, Chrissy. Good to see you. And Charles, good to see you as well. I think I have one of your pieces here, Charles. Yeah, I got a couple of your artwork, I think. Um, but yeah. Let's see. What else can I talk about here? Um, you're going to need more layers. Like if you want to get your colored pencil portraits as realistic looking as your pet portraits, you're just going to need more layers with the colored pencils. Um, Good shadows. Like you have the shapes. Notice the shapes again. So you got some good shapes here with the shadows. You're doing the right thing. Not quite the right value. Like this in particular, this is really dark, right? That's super, super dark on the side of her face. More layers is going to help get you there, but you're probably going to have to use black as well. A touch of black and some dark brown to get those values. Notice how the ear, her right ear, is very, very dark. And you can see that the value difference between the side of her head and your ear here is just far too light. So her ear is far too light here, should be darker. Um, with the background, you're definitely going to want more layers. Yeah, it's just too much texture, too much of the colored pencil texture in the background. Also, there's a bit of haloing. You can see it's much lighter right up against her than it is right here. You don't want that. You don't want that haloing. Um, I would recommend cutting out the background as sharp as possible. So what if I were to do this portrait, I would have filled in the background so where there was no texture, it was completely covered. And I would have really focused on making this edge that separates the subject from the background as sharp as I possibly could. So like over here, there's a little bit of smudging and it's not as sharp and it sort of distorts the shape of her face a little bit. You can't quite tell where the edge of her face is supposed to be because there's a bit of smudginess down here on the shoulder. There's just a bit of unevenness in the lines. So getting those lines nice and crispy, that's going to go a long way. Same thing with like the separation of her neck and her chin here and her hand. Getting those lines again really, really sharp and crispy is going to just make everything stand out a lot better. Um, let's see. So again, the shapes are always just so important. Like this shape right here, oh, that's the wrong color. This shape right here. So not her nostril, but the tip of her nose. You start to have it put in a little bit, but it's just not dark enough. It's just not dark enough. You have this shape here. This shape. Again, you have it, but it's just not dark enough. This shape. And then that goes up into her nostril there. You don't have this shape at all. This shape should be right here, right? Those subtle shapes you got to find. This eyelid is really good. See this highlight? See that highlight right here? You don't have the highlight. What's the rule that I have about doing eyes? Anybody know my rule about doing eyes? Hopefully somebody knows. I'm gonna get a drink of water real quick while you guys throw out a couple guesses. Oh, okay, Diane. All right. Well, perhaps do both at the same time. No, that's not the rule. The rule is, or one of the rules, never put the eyelashes in until you have the skin around the eye complete. Again, I'll say it again. Never put the eyelashes in until you have the skin around the eye complete. If you had the skin around the eyelid complete, then you would have had this highlight and then you put your eyelashes in. And you would have that highlight behind your eyelashes. So that's the rule. Generally people are going to do that. But oftentimes people rush to them and they don't complete the skin 100%. Don't do it 90%. Don't do it 95 or 99%. 100% finish the skin that's behind the eyelashes. So all of the skin immediately around the eye that the eyelashes sits on top of, finish it 100%. Because trust me, you don't want to try to fix the skin in between 500 eyelashes. It's a nightmare. You get smudgy. Eyelashes are often just really black. So as soon as you accidentally mush that black eyelash, all of a sudden the skin gets all muddy and gross. Right? So just be careful with that. Always finish the skin first. Um, let's see what else. There's a little bit more saturation in her skin. So there's some saturation discrepancies as well. Like this is a nice, excuse me, this is a nice orange color, but this is a much nicer orange color. Like there's a lot more orange in even yellow, sort of a yellow orange kind of color. And yours is a little, there's just a tiny lackluster in the saturation department. Same thing with here. Look at this orange. Look at that. Super tasty orange. Yours is khaki. Yours is not orange, right? Yours is not orange really at all. Yours is about as dry khaki as it gets. And these high saturation areas create the illusion of subsurface scattering, which is the light penetrating the skin and reflecting. It bounces around a little bit. Like when you shine a flashlight behind your ear and your ear turns super bright red, that's subsurface scattering, the light passing through the skin. Um, you can see a little bit on her finger, the light, you get this like really red color, right? You get this nice red color. Yeah, there's nothing even remotely close to that on the fingers down here, right? So these highly saturated colors really, really important to create that effect of the skin, okay? Yeah, purple is a fantastic color. Um, uh, I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot of purple going on in her skin. She has real orangey skin, and it's really well lit. So there's not a whole lot of purple that I could argue for in her skin. But where I would say there's purple is actually near the highlights more. So these highlighted parts, like on her cheek, this is ninja purple. Look at that. I I can't be the only one that sees purple here, right? That is purple. That's purple. I mean, that's purple and gray, but that's still purple, right? This is happening all through here, all through here. A little bit on the eyelids. Do you see the purple tones that are transitioning between the highlight and the midtones around the highlights? Down here on the chin, purple. So there's still purple taking place. Just it's a little bit more ninja. It's hiding that much better. Because usually the purple, oh, you can't see the mouse. Oh, hmm. Thank you for telling me that. I didn't realize. Let me see if I can go window shadow. Hmm. I don't know if that does it. That's not. Um. Hmm. No. I might have to look into that. I didn't realize that you couldn't see the mouse. Anyways, I was talking about here. This color, you still see that it's a little bit more red purple, but it small amount of purple. Anyways, that's the whole point. Um, I'm done with this one. It came out really good. There's just a few, few things that you need to work on, which I mentioned. Thank you so much for the submissions, Joanne. They are really great. Up next is Darek. Um, and I was surprised to see this one by you, Darek. This pastel project. This I think this is the first pastel project that I've seen from you, actually. And this is, I mean, this looks like you're just starting pastels, maybe. So you didn't want to do too you didn't want to do anything too ambitious. Uh, but yeah, you did really well on this one. Really good symmetry with the reflection of the sky and the water, by the way. I see the shapes. I see the shapes right through here. All of this symmetry. Yeah. I see I see the symmetry. So good job. Um I don't know. A second one? Okay, yeah. I would say this part of the boat looks a little too gray. So the reflection of the boat, maybe just a bit too textured and too gray. I'd say like this bluish color probably be like a better than like this grayish color. I just feel like it should be more blue. It just stands out to be too gray to me. But uh, I'm nitpicking. Oops, didn't do that. I drew on the original, so I needed it. Lots of texture in the sky. Yeah, you spent a whole bunch of time putting in those stars. If I had to guess, you're probably pretty close to how many there are in the sky. That's a lot of stars. Um, for future reference, uh, you did not have to put in these stars by hand. You can actually use spray acrylic paint on top of pastel. So if you were to do the splatter effect with acrylic paint, you could probably have done it in half the time. So yeah, you can mix acrylic paint on top just for just for future reference. If you're gonna do 5 billion stars in your sky, you can cheat a little bit with that. Um, Otherwise, I would say maybe a small variation in star color. You could have used a little bit of pinks. You could have used a little bit of yellow. Um, because when you look at stars, they aren't just pure white dots. They generally have some subtle color variations. So you could have used a little bit of pink, a little bit of light blue, a little bit of orange or yellow, just to have some subtle color variations, and that would go a long way. Also, a shooting star. Yeah, a shooting star might have made a bit of an impact. Like if I were to just take my brush here, grab some white, and you have this star right here. Just boop, maybe maybe a little, maybe not that long, but right, just a little shooting star to have some more variety. Because yeah, stars are just one of those things that you can overdo if they all look the same, and here they're starting to look a little bit too much the same. You could have gone a little bit darker also. So if you had you gone darker, let me see here. Let me got. I think this is the tool. Yeah. So if I go darker in the sky, just look at how much more vast the sky looks, right? And I just went a tiny bit darker. So if had you gone darker on your base color, you just notice how much more like the stars pop and how much more distance you get in the sky. So that's all I got to say about that one. But for your second pastel project, I look forward to more. Be a bit more ambitious next time. And then, of course, Darek, You submitted this lovely graphite portrait. And I mean, your portraits are just amazing. You have such wonderful control of your values, of your gradients. You have amazing gradients with your portraits. And this one exemplifies that really, really well. Like the shiny part on the forehead. I gotta remember you can't see my mouse. The is this oh, I have the wrong color. I was like, why is it white? So this really subtle change in value to get that shine on the forehead here around the brow bones, really, really nice. The nice little textures of the subtle wrinkles here in the eyes, fantastic. You know, you add those wrinkles without really aging the subject a lot. So that can be tricky. You have nice, subtle smile lines that are coming down, real subtle. Like this is real precise stuff. So I mean, you almost can't get better graphite portraits than this. The only thing, like if you wanted to get more realism, you'd have to go a bit bigger. I don't know what size this is, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably no bigger than like A1 or A4. Sorry. Um, Maybe A2. I doubt A2 though. So like 8.5 by 11 or A4 ish. I'd say is probably about the scale of this portrait. I'd say you to get more realistic, you probably have to be like A2 though. Um, yeah, probably around A2 or A3, depending on the um, like the composition. 9 by 12, yeah. Okay, so it's right around there, like 8.5 by 11 kind of thing. Um, so you'd probably want just to go maybe 18 by 20. I'd say 18 by 20, and you could add more depth, more details, more textures to get more realism. It'd take you considerable amount of more time, but if you wanted to go more realistic, but these are really great. The one thing that bothers me just a tiny bit as far as composition goes on this one is you are cutting his shoulders off at the joints. Okay, you're cutting them off at the shoulder joint. So you see his trap muscles. His trap muscles are right here, right? Those are his traps. Because you're cutting his shoulders off, it almost makes his traps look like his shoulders, and it makes his head look really big. So you gotta be careful with the composition. And when it comes to portraits, when it comes to people or animals for that matter, never cut at the joint. Okay, never cut at the joint because it distorts size. So like draw, if I were to draw my hand and I cut it right at the wrist, like here, the illusion that it creates is a ambiguity in like length. So it changes it creates this weird ambiguity in length. So if like cutting at the elbows looks really weird because it makes the upper arm look like it goes on for a really long time. It's the same thing with like the shoulders here. It doesn't make it look like the shoulders go on forever. It actually makes the traps kind of look like the shoulders. And if you look at it, it's like, why is his head so big? So yeah, just never cut at the joint. Yeah, yeah, never cut at the joint. Um, I see that you ran out of paper here, but yeah, use bigger paper next time. It's always better to use more paper to draw a smaller portrait than it is to draw more portrait on not enough paper. And this is a good example of why not to do that. Yeah, everyone here is so good. Yeah. Darek has amazing portraits. He's been submitting for quite some time, actually. All right, up next is Linda. She has this extremely difficult nighttime scene in colored pencils. And I'm not going to talk too much about this one. The only thing there's two things that I want to say about this one, Linda. This is nighttime scenes incredibly difficult. They're super hard. They can be extremely tricky because you're always working in darker values, and darker values are inherently more difficult for people to work with because you see people have a tendency to not see subtle changes when all the colors are dark in the first place. So working in dark values generally is just harder, which makes nighttime scenes that much more difficult. So the first thing is you have some haloing around some of your objects. So like the tree here sort of has like this white glowish to it that actually feels like it separates it from the ground. This tree, I have no idea what to explain or how to explain the white glow here. The white glow sort of like here, some of the white glow. I don't know exactly what this is, or like these. I'm not sure what these are. Outside of the context of the reference photo, it's difficult for the viewer to comprehend what these are supposed to be. Um, you can see like this green outline. I think this is a telephone pole here. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a telephone pole, but you can see a lot of haloing right around it with like this green fuzzy line. So you want to make those lines super crisp, especially with these really strong vertical lines like the tree trunks. You want to make the silhouette very strong. You want to make the silhouette very strong. When it comes to the nighttime scenes, and really you can think of it like nighttime scenes and then the really bright sunny days where the sun is outside the canopy of the trees and you're getting some really hard shadows on the ground. So it looks like you have a hard shadow here. I could be mistaken. I am not 100% sure. This bush thingy mabob looks like it has a really long, large shadow. At least I think that's what it's supposed to be. This sort of looks like a shadow, but I'm not sure what it's a shadow for. I This looks like a really long shadow from the telephone pole here. So you want to separate these lights from the shadows, and wherever you can find the silhouette, you really want to emphasize that silhouette. Like the tree here, like you have this really big giant tree that quite literally takes up 30% of the screen, or 30% of your paper, right? That is a lot of space, right? This is a lot of space. So honestly, that tree probably should have taken you 30% of the time when working on this, because the space that that tree occupies controls so much attention of the viewer. But if you look, it kind of just looks like a mix of green and black a little bit, sort of colored in this direction. Like there's a lot of directional lines that come through here. Sort of looks like you colored it in this direction. And I can see that. And the viewer will be able to see that. And there's not a whole lot of information there. Like it's covering 30% of the paper, and yet there's not really anything happening that makes it stand out or really clarifies much that it is in fact a tree. I mean, contextually, it makes sense that it's a tree, and I would put money on that it's a tree. But is there enough information there that if you removed everything else that people would recognize it as a tree? I don't know. I don't know. So you got to be careful with that. You know, It's the same idea when I talk about backgrounds, because sometimes people don't put enough time in their background. And if you think about it, the background, if it takes up 40% or even just 30%, I mean, that's still a big portion of the artwork. So you have to spend a considerable amount of time working on the background so that the the lack of polish in the background doesn't distract from the main subject. So with this tree taking up 30% of the artwork, you really want to make sure that the way you capture the tree doesn't take away from everything else, because I really like all the little details and the bright or the distinct contrast between the objects, especially like this grass up here. Like this grass is really cool. I really like all this texture up in the front. And this texture only makes up what, 4%, 3% of the overall image. And this tree takes up 30%, but the grass is cooler than the tree. The grass, in my opinion, looks cooler than the tree. But unfortunately, the grass is just a small part of the foreground, and the viewer's eye is sort of being pulled towards the bright part because that stands out. So there should probably be a story taking place right here, because the tree is not the story. The grass is cool to look at, but the viewer's eye is towards the center, and there's not actually anything happening there. I mean, even if you just put like a silhouette of a person walking, that would probably pull the viewer in. So if I were to just like, I don't know, put a person, a person walking, maybe they're walking their dog. This is so bad, but right. So just, I mean, give it a story. Um, just think about those things, in the future. But if you just if you're gonna have something take 30% of the artwork, just make sure that it takes 30% of the time, or you put 30% of the time in it. Anyways, um, I'll stop rambling about this. I like this one a lot. You did a good job. And you also did the waterfall project. This one came out really good. Great bravery. Look at the bravery. Putting all those little leaves and sticks and stuff over the waterfall. Really good job there. You have a really dark. You got really, really dark, full coverage of the black here and here, all through these cracks and everything. But not so much here, not so much here or here, not even really here, right? There's still like a little bit of paper grain showing through. So these areas aren't as don't feel as full coverage as you did these dark areas here. Even on the rocks are really good here. These really nice dark spots, but not so much here. These areas could probably use a bit more green, another layer to get rid of that graininess, get the paper covered, um, and it would just look better. Yeah, it would just look better. This is already really good. Difficult subject. This is not an easy project to do, but some more layer of green here to cover the paper, get rid of that graininess, would go a long way for sure. Same thing with the water. The water still sort of feels a little grainy with the colored pencil texture. Another layer of those colors on the water would smooth it out. But otherwise, you did a good job on it. And then you also did this one. This is one of your best. Did you use the brush and pencil titanium white and touch up texture here? Is that how you did the white highlights? You have to let me know. By the way, you like how you're inside the color picker? Oh, yeah, help me. I'm stuck. Get me out of here. Thanks. Um, all right. Okay, you did use that. Yeah, it's really good. Really, really good. I can see the bokeh effects. I can see the circles, the subtle bokeh. That's really good. Background is nice and smooth. Again, I think here there's maybe a little bit too much grain texture. Um, if you used a gray colored pencil, you wouldn't affect the value too much. You just affect the smoothness of it. Same thing with the frog. Frog also feels like there's too much of the pencil grain. See, in areas like this, areas like that where you have like really nice, smooth, there's not a lot of colored pencil grain. When you have one area of the artwork like that, in the background too, that area, this area here, in comparison to say like this area right here or this area right here, or even this area, right? You have these areas, like these are good, super smooth, very, very smooth. But then this has a lot of pencil grain. This has a lot of pencil grain. This has a lot of pencil grain. The frog has a lot of pencil grain. This has a lot of pencil grain. This is smooth. So super smooth, super smooth, all smooth, real, real smooth here. But then there's areas, it's like a patchiness of like really smooth, polished areas versus the not as smooth areas. And I think that takes away from your artwork because if you get all of your areas super smooth the way you have in some of the areas, it's just going to look like 1,000 times better. It's going to elevate your artwork immensely. And really, you don't have to do anything different. You just have to spend just a little bit more time in those areas by adding more pigment to the paper. You can use a tiny bit of solvent. Like if you dip the paintbrush in solvent and then you dry it with a paper towel, the smallest bit of solvent will help smooth out that grainy look and you'll just have that much better area. The Yeah, the difference between like texture and um, the colored pencil graininess is different. In the areas where the green check mark, you don't have the colored pencil grain. Like there's none of the colored pencil grain. So the difference between having the grain versus not having the grain, I think, is taking away from it. It's okay to use the grain to your advantage, but if you have some areas that are like really smooth, it sort of feels less balanced, I'd say. But if you want it to look like that, then you will have no argument. But you did a really good job on that. When I get back, when I return from the United States, we're going to be doing this project here in pastels. So this will actually be the next pastel project. All right, up next is John, and he submitted this magnificent digital portrait. John, how long have you been doing digital? You haven't even been doing digital for like really that long, like maybe a year or something, or even less. Your digital artwork has come so far so quickly. Like you have really really outdone yourself. The the portraits in particular that you've been doing is just really good. And this one is a perfect example of how well you've been doing. The lighting, everything about this is just wonderful. Yeah, yeah. I mean, but yeah, so like I think everybody's done like a little bit of digital artwork, but probably wouldn't say that when they began. Like I've been using Photoshop since I was 14 years old. So, uh a while, just shy of 20 years. Uh, Feels wrong to say, but so just shy of 20 years I've been using Photoshop, but digital art wise, I've only like touched it. I've only touched digital artwork. I wouldn't even say that I began digital artwork yet. Like I've just kind of fiddled with it a few times here and there. Uh, but I've never done a digital painting. I've never done a digital painting. I've done digital coloring. That's about it. Um, but this, yeah, this is really good. You have really good brush texture. Like that's something that I have never tried to do. I've never tried to actually paint digitally, and you have really, really good brush texture here. I love the. It almost looks like hexagons. It looks like hexagon shaped brush for the hair, and it's really cool. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Um, Now, I don't know if this was intentional for this project, but if I had to guess her age, I'd put her like mid 20s. But your painting makes her look 14. So I don't know if your intention was to take a 24-year-old and take 10 years off of it, but your painting makes her look 14. And there's a few reasons. There really it's just the subtle wrinkles that you don't have in the digital painting that remove those years. The corner creases around the mouth. So let me just grab a color. So I'll point out to you the real subtle creases that aren't in your painting that make her look 14 instead of 24. I'll zoom in too. So this little ring, it's subtle, right? Like it's very small. You can barely see it. Also, the accentuation of the smile line here. Now, if I come over to the face, now you have this subtle line here, but you don't have the dimples. You don't have the little dimples there. The other thing is around the eyes. So you see the wrinkles here, and you see the circle around the eye a bit more. So here you can see it a little bit more. And then also this shadow right here. Look at this shadow right here. Okay. So you have a little bit of creasing, right? You don't have the circle. You don't have the circle. You don't have the circle over here. And this shadow is a little bit too light. So this is just a little bit too light, and then there's no real creases. So that's what makes her age look a bit different. So this shadow, just a tiny bit too light here. Just a little bit too light. Also, the eyebrow curl, it's missing. I'm being nitpicky because this is fantastic. All right, I'm being super nitpicky, and you're not giving me much option. So the other thing is, see the shadow on her chin. She has the triangle. You have no triangle. So that's it. That's it. And that is it. Also, I'd probably do like, there's this highlight on her lip. A highlight right here. Make her lip look a little bit glossier with that nice bright pink. Um, did you purposely change her eye color, by the way? Did you make her eyes brown for a reason? Or did you just forget that they're blue? The other thing that I wanted to talk about, um, this eye. Okay, you did it on purpose. Okay, they look better blue. Just so you know. Uh, this eye has a nice highlight, right? It has a nice highlight. This eye, however, does not. Except you put it in anyway, which is wrong. Don't do that. Don't add the speck for the sake of adding the speck, okay? This looks better because this is the focal eye. That's the focal eye, okay? So don't add the speck for the sake of adding the speck. Also, the sclera is too bright. That's also what I wanted to bring up. Here's the value. So let's let me just, here's white. Let me grab that value again. Here's the value of her sclera. And then here's yours. It's too bright. And this highlight also, don't do that. Don't add the speck for the sake of the speck. And then this sclera is just a little bit too bright. Because that eye is actually in shadow. That whole eye is in shadow. You can see the cast shadow here. This is a cast shadow from her eyebrow. Cast shadow. So her eye is in shadow. And that's why you're not seeing the speck. That's why the speck doesn't happen here. Because you can see the cast shadow running across her eye right here. This part right here is not in cast shadow. See that? Cast shadow, not cast shadow. And that's why this speck does not exist in that eye. Okay? Sometimes the white speck in the eye doesn't work. Here, it doesn't work. I think it looks better without. I think it looks better without. It draws more attention to this part, and it makes that look more like it's in shadow. I'm done nitpicking because this portrait is fantastic. Thank you so much for the submission. Up next is Charles. Real quick, Charles, I added your sketch here of Snoop Dogg. Just for future, anybody else that wants to submit artwork, don't do it like this because I can't color correct it and with like other objects and stuff like this. These kind of pictures of your artwork are fine for Instagram, but not for art critiques. So just keep that in mind in the future. This is super interesting piece, Charles. I don't really have a lot of critiquing that I could say because it is just so unique. It is well done. I mean, this is clearly an astronaut. I like the space scene. I like the composition. The ear gauges, I don't know why they're white. I feel like they shouldn't be. Okay, yeah, leave me speechless next month. I look forward to that. Um, yeah, I'm not sure why the ear gauges are white. I feel like they should be colorful, but um, that's fine, I guess. The only other thing, like skin color, more diversity of the color of the skin here. It sort of just feels kind of like white and orange, just those two colors. And the skin is never just white and orange. So definitely include more colors in the skin. You're just going to get better skin overall. Also, this highlight on the nose is pointing this way, but this is the tip of the nose. So the nose is twisted a little bit. Um, and this dude has some real big nostrils. Like those are some extra large nostrils. And I just don't think that his nose has nostrils like that. So careful with just making nostrils like gigantic black holes in the face because they're not gigantic black holes. They're usually not even black. Usually they're like a dark red because there's a lot of blood flow in there. Um, so just be careful with the direction of the bridge of the nose for the highlight and um, look at some nostrils because they're not giant black holes. So that's really the only critique that I have for this. Add more colors to the skin, not just white and orange. But this is really cool. Yeah, this is a really cool project. I think that has a lot of potential. I really like the eyes, by the way. Eyes are really cool. Kind of creepy, but they're cool. I like them. This one is also from Charles, and this one I love this. Charles, this is awesome. This genuinely makes me laugh, and I think that you did a really good job at establishing shapes and values in the subject here. Really good shapes, great face, funny expression. I love the duck right here. The duck, if you didn't recognize that the duck is here. Um, and then of course the duck that he's holding. I think compositionally this is really fun. I would have loved to see the rest of his arm here. I don't like that his arm is just cut off for no reason. I feel like he is like this is the picture. This is the picture. And then his arm should have been in it. Um, the other thing is you have to ask yourself, does the background add to the project or take away from the project? And in the case of this one, I would say it almost certainly takes away because the background has a majority of the vibrant colors. So, as I was mentioning earlier about the three types of contrast, saturation contrast, here, the main subject, the important feature of this project is not dominating the saturation. It's actually being dominated by the saturation of the background. If I were to copy this and I want to get rid of some of the texture of the background, so I'm going to just blur it a lot. And I'm also going to take away some of the saturation. Not all of it, but some of it. And what I'll do is I'll just apply that to the background. So I'm just going to very loosely work around the main subject here. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but I'm doing this rather quickly. Also, I think that's supposed to be the duck's wing. It doesn't work. It's cut off. It's weird. The color is weird. Not the duck's wing doesn't work. It does not add. It's subtracting. Here, now the main subject sticks out. The background is far less distracting. You can actually identify the duck on his shoulder much quicker because I didn't even notice the duck at first. And then when I saw the duck, I started to laugh because it just made this painting so much more hilarious, and I love it. This is one of the coolest paintings I've seen in a while. But I don't think the background works. I don't think the background helps the composition. The texture is again the texture contrast is competing with the foreground, and I think that had the background been lower in saturation and lower in texture, if the painting looked like this, it would just be so great. I think, yeah, I think I wouldn't tell you that you should repaint this, but if you were to repaint this and did the background like this and also added, didn't chop off his arm halfway through, his left arm, try to center him more in the on the canvas, it just it would just be one of the greatest paintings. I would genuinely want to hang this up in my house. It's so funny. It's such a cool concept too. Okie dokie. Thank you so much, Charles, for the submissions. Up next, we got Susan. She did the sunshine portrait from the art club. I'll be posting the time lapse of this next week. I wanted to do the time lapse of this Wednesday, but I had some technical difficulties. I was in the process of editing the time lapse for this, um, all 11 hours of footage, and I hit some shortcut key on my keyboard, which did something that I never knew what was. I still don't know what it does, but I meant to hit Control D and I hit Shift D in my program, and it just it messed everything up, and I didn't notice it because I was zoomed in on the timeline. And when I hit Shift D, it basically, I was at the end of the project and it had erased everything before that point. And I didn't notice because, like I said, I was zoomed in on the timeline. And so I was doing some corrections. I think I was adding some transitions or something along those lines. And then I zoomed back out and I noticed that the whole the whole first 9 minutes of the video, is 11-minute video, uh, was gone. And I was like, what is happening? And I did everything I could for like an hour to undo it. I was hitting Control Z for like 15 minutes straight, just tapping Control Z to undo everything, and I was never able to recover what I had spent hours working on. So I had to completely restart from scratch the entire video, and I'm still in the process of editing it. I ran out of time, unfortunately. But anyways, sorry, I had to ramble nonsensically for 5 minutes. Um, I did some color correction on this one, Susan. It felt like it was a little bit more blue from the photograph. So hopefully I've color corrected it in a way that more closely resembles your actual artwork. This one came out really good. I like to see the small corrections that I recommended, especially on the nose there, from when you submitted it in or you showed it to me in Discord. The background is really well done, good colors. It's nice and soft. It doesn't distract from the main subject. Really beautiful colors in the flowers. This, of course, whole project has Susan's unique brush control. I don't even know how to describe it. Susan always has this, she always has this unique look to her work. Her work has such a unique overall texture to it. Uh, the hair came out really good. I don't see as much green. I'm not sure if maybe you didn't add the green or if it's just from the color correction, but I don't quite see the green that I added in the hair. But really good flyaways. Yeah, excellent flyaways. They came out super, super good. Uh, the skin could use a little bit more of that yellow orange. I'm not seeing as much range in the value and the shading of the skin. So Uh, that looks to be missing a little bit. Now, that's not really something you can go back and correct because you'd have to work around all these flyaways, so I wouldn't recommend it. But especially on like uh, the bridge of her nose, like sort of like in this area, um, it had a bit more shadow to it, so you could see the shadow on the bridge of her nose, and then also on her cheek. There was a bit more of a shadow there. But you had green in the hair, yeah. So it's probably just the photograph. I can't really pick it up in the digital version, but you did a really good job on it. Yeah, the dress looks really good too. Nice translucent. Um, yeah, really, really well done. Great flowers in the hair. I actually like the flowers in the hair actually look like different flowers. They look like larger flowers instead of the small ones. I like the flowers though. Very good highlights here. Um, flyaways. Yeah, those look really, really good. Fantastic work, Susan. I don't know if I've seen another portrait from you. Have you done another portrait before, Susan? Because I don't recall. Up next, we got Claire. She did the potato, the infamous potato from the Intro to Colored Pencil course, and this is a great potato, Claire. Yeah, this potato looks delicious. I just want to chop it up and throw it in my air fryer. Um, yeah, it looks really, really good. Great shadow, like getting the shadow to dissipate into the paper. Perfect. You did it perfectly. I wouldn't change a thing. Keep it up. Up next is Scent. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, he did this lovely pastel project, and it almost looks like the bed of a truck right here. The pots look really cool. Now you mentioned something about like struggling with the sky and the cloth. Honestly, I think the cloth is good. I like the see the cloth is difficult because you have sharp and soft shadows that often are combined. But I think the cloth actually looks really good. It's the sky that I think you should have smoothed out a bit more. I'm not sure what tool you used to do any of the blending here, but had you smoothed out the sky, maybe I can do this a little bit artificially. Let me see here. Wait. Oops. Okay, let me see if I can smooth out the sky. I'm gonna try motion blur. That's the wrong. Can't. Where's the? Why is that here? Sorry. It brought this little window up on the wrong screen. Yeah, maybe I'll just do it like this, and then this might not work as well as some of the other. But let me just try to artificially blend the sky with like a horizontal motion blur. I think, yeah, it's not gonna look the best, but I hopefully it gets the idea across. Had you blended out the sky and gotten rid of that really grainy texture, I think that the cloth across the sky would look really a lot better, and everything overall would just look better. So it's sort of like the really, really harsh texture of the white that's meant to be the sky that is sort of distracting the viewer from um, oh, hey there, Claire. You felt like the left side looked 3D, but the right side didn't. Let me just go back to it really quick. Well, I don't have the reference photo in mind. I mean, if you really wanted to make it look more three dimensional, Again, I would go back to the topic of shapes. So I'm just gonna really arbitrarily make it a shadow up. So I'm just gonna make a shadow like this and just fill it with like a darkish brown, and then change this to overlay. Maybe go a little bit darker, a little less saturated, maybe a bit more greenish, and then forgive me for, and then I'll just soften the form shadow. I'm just gonna soften this edge a little bit so it's not a hard edge. Boom, more three-dimensional. So the way you're gonna get things to look more three-dimensional, hold on a second. So the way you're going to get things to look more three-dimensional, if you recall doing this project, which you probably do since you just did it, the whole point was to create the gradient underneath the texture. And so by creating the dark shapes of the gradient before adding the texture, that's how you're going to get it to look a little bit more three-dimensional. So you just need to darken the value where you want those shadows to be. And then of course, just horizontal blending of the sky, and this project would have been perfect. I really like the highlights on these jugs thing. These jugs though. I really like it a lot. And I love the texture of the blue paper coming through what I perceive to be the back of a truck. To me, it feels like the back of a truck. It could be like a boat or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of why this would be the back of a truck, but there also be a clothing line. No idea. But I like it. I like it. I just think the sky needed to be blended out. Thank you for this submission. All right, up next, well, actually last but not least is I wanted to talk about the monthly mastery. This is last month, monthly mastery number 7. And I only got one from Linda. So Linda is the only one doing her homework. This is a tricky one. Okay, this is a tricky one. And I even brought in the original reference photo because I'm gonna have to break this down for everyone. Especially anyone that wants to do the monthly masteries and actually get good. So there's a few mistakes here, and I wanted to bring those out so that anybody that wants to do the monthly masteries can make less mistakes on them. So for anybody that doesn't know what the monthly mastery is, you got to be in the art club to participate in them. But each month I give you a reference photo that looks very similar to this. Right now, we're not dealing with anything that has to do with color. It's all about light and creating form. And for anybody that doesn't know what form is, it's just the illusion of 3 dimensions on a two-dimensional surface. So making things look 3D. So I give you a reference photo like this, and then I gave you a rule set to break down the lighting in the objects. And then no matter what medium you want to use, you just follow the rules, and progressively it's getting harder. And then next year we're going to start with color. We're going to start color next year. But for now, we're just doing monochromatic so that we can build an understanding of light and also master the medium that we're working on. Because a few of the key features of what I expect a lot of time put into the monthly masteries, because I want the paper or the surface that you're working on to be completely covered. I want sharp, clean edges, and that's pretty much it. I want the surface to be covered, and I want your edges to be nice and sharp. I want your gradients to be nice and smooth. Okay, so that's the important thing. it does nobody any good to rush through the monthly masteries just for the sake of being able to say that you did them. It's much more important that you take the time to exercise with your medium. So in this case, with like colored pencils, you really want to take that extra time to intimately understand what it takes to get sharp edges, what it takes to get completely smooth coverage on your paper. Maybe you even learn that you need to change paper in order to get a better, smoother finish. That's part of the mastery, because I've used hundreds of different papers with colored pencils, and I I have such a good understanding of paper choice with colored pencils that when I start to use a new one, I know right away if I'm going to like it or if I'm never going to recommend it or use it again. Um, yeah, follow the rules. So the rule set, relatively simple. It starts off really easy. And as you can see here, Linda conveniently has the list on the left side. Now, here, this is shadows. And this is light. So everything, whatever colors you choose, and you don't necessarily have to do this in black and white. You technically could use colors as long as the values are correct. Um, Everything that is a shadow must be represented within the first three values, and everything that is in the light must be represented in the second three values. So that's the first rule. So this being the darkest shadow, this would be a 0. This would probably be a 1. This sort of looks like a 1. This sort of looks like a 1. This looks like a 0. This looks like a 2. This looks like a 1. This looks like a 2. This looks like a 2, kind of. Yeah, so something like that. Everything else is being hit by the light. So this would be a 3. This would be a 3, it looks like. Maybe a 4, a 4, 4, and a 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Maybe. Something like that, if I had to guess based off of uh, Linda's submission here. So that's essentially what the rule set tells you to do. And I guess this would also be a 5 here. So what you need to do is you need to break down these shapes, fill them in with the corresponding value correctly. And we've gotten to a point where now, once you fill in the corresponding shape, then you have to add reflections and highlights. So for instance, this being a value of a 2, there's also a reflection in here, which takes that value up to a 3. There's some reflection here on a shadow that's a 1, so this should go up to a 2. And here this goes up to a 2 as well. So there's some reflections there. And that's basically how it is supposed to break down. Now that's breaking it down based off of Linda's artwork here, but let's jump to the reference photo. So the way you need to measure this is first identify the darkest value. That's clearly black. So this is going to be your 0. Every other shadow is obviously lighter than that. I don't see any other zeros. The next darkest value is clearly this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. So those are all ones. Yeah, those are all ones. And then you have this shadow, which is a 2, this shadow, 2, cast shadow, 2. Yep, that's the way it should be. Because you can clearly see that these shadows are the same. These shadows are the same. This shadow is noticeably lighter, but still, this here about the same, and these two about the same. These two, I mean, sorry, I forgot you can't see the mouse. I gotta see if I can fix that. So that's the way it should be numbered if we go back. So this was 0, this was 0, this was 1, this was 2. These are the same, but they shouldn't be 2, 2. So not quite calculating the value differences as well. Now we go into the lights. This is the darkest light by far. The table is hit by the light, so it is a light. So this is 3. Then there's no other light that comes close to this, so nothing should match this. The next one should be 4s, and I'd say this is an obvious 4. This is an obvious 4. And then everything else should be 5s. You could put this at 4. Yeah, you could maybe even put this as a 4. You could maybe put that as a 4. But everything that's the brightest is the 5s. This, I would put this as a 4 also. So only these are 5s. Yeah. And this too. That top part of the cube there. So that's the way that you should map this out. And then fill in your shapes appropriately. This I would also say is a 4. Anyways, I know that this sounds a little complicated, but this is the 7th project. So it progressively gets harder. So if you join the art club, if you want to start doing the monthly masteries, don't jump in where we're at. You want to go back to the beginning and start these from the beginning. You're going to get the most out of it that way. And trust me, when we get to color, things are going to get more complex. Okay? Things are going to get more complex, and you need to be able to do this with a certain level of confidence, because this is what I'm doing is I'm training your brain to see the shapes of lights and shadows, which is what I talked about a lot at the beginning of the live stream when we were looking at whose project was that? It was the bird. Was it Dorothy? So when we were looking at Dorothy's project of the bird, let me just go back there so you guys can remember. Remember, I was talking about identifying the shapes of the shadows. And first you have to be able to identify the shadows. So that's the purpose of the monthly masteries. The monthly masteries, as I said, are progressively getting harder, but you need to be able to identify the shadow shapes. So by differentiating them based off of their value and separating lights from darks, you get better and better at doing that so that you can start to see those in more complex subjects like this bird. Because once you're able to see them in the simple shapes, like I broke down the bird in the circles. Remember, I broke down these shapes with just circles and cylinders. Then you can start to break those shapes down more complex like this. And then once you're able to apply those to your projects, you're going to get better artwork just immediately, just immediately. So that's the whole purpose of the monthly masteries. I know it looks tedious and it looks kind of ridiculous. It almost looks like homework, you know, to label things and sort of solve the puzzle. But as you get better and better at doing this, you don't have to number things. You don't have to write down numbers or anything like that. You can just sort of do it immediately. So just don't skip the steps. Don't skip the steps. And when you're doing the monthly mastery, if at any point you want to write down the numbers like this and send it to me and be like, hey, you think this is correct? I was a little unsure about this shape or this shadow or whatnot. Feel free to message me on Discord or email me or whatever with your numbers, because I'm more than happy to clarify anything so that you do it correctly. Because if you do it, if you label your numbers incorrectly and then you do it, then when you submit it for the live critique, you know, you just did it wrong. At least if you give me your number sheet before you actually spend all the time coloring it in, I can correct you before and explain it before, so that maybe you get it while you're doing it as opposed to after you've completed it. All right. Well, that is the final project for today. So let me just go here. Yeah, that is it for today. So if you guys don't have any other questions for me before I go, don't even know how long I've been streaming for, but I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed looking at all of your guys' artwork. It's super, super fantastic. I really appreciate all the time that you put into it and submitting it to me for me to talk about. I hope that at the very least I taught you a few things today. I feel like I've sort of talked about the same thing over and over again with the shadow shapes and whatnot, but regardless, I hope that I've given you some insight to improve your work. I will, now that I think about it, there will not be a live critique next month because I won't be here to do it. The next live critique will be, I guess, October. Yeah. So after September, that's when the next live critique is. So you have plenty of time to get some artwork done before the next live critique. And of course, I will be back on Monday to do the pastel project. Tuesday, there will not be a colored pencil project, but I will be doing an oil painting live stream. So I'll do that next week. But anyways, thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out. I really appreciate it. And I will see you on Monday. Take care.